Hello, welcome to today's webinar, Plan Your Final Arrangements, a Loving Gift for Your Survivors. My name is Stephanie McLaughlin, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, there are a couple of housekeeping items that I'd like to cover. We want you to feel comfortable navigating the webinar system. This slide outlines the icons at the top of your screen and what they do. Click the double arrow if you'd like to enter the full screen mode, and hit your escape key to exit the full screen mode. Click the minus sign if you'd like to hide the right-hand sidebar. Click the icons at the top of your screen to access the chat panel or the resources section if you've hidden it previously. You can also click the avatar icon to access the resources area, which will appear in the same panel as the chat screen. We'll be covering a great deal of information today, and there will be plenty of time after the presentation for questions and answers. If you have questions for Buddy during the presentation, please type them into the chat window. The moderators will monitor them and relay them to Buddy during the Q&A session. If you need technical help during the webinar, you can communicate with the moderators via the chat system on the right hand of your screen. Also, we found that sometimes people don't feel comfortable asking questions in a live setting, or questions might come to you later. If that's the case, please send an email after the session and Buddy will be happy to answer you. We will be sharing resources and our free gift at the end of the webinar. You can find them by clicking the avatar icon at the top of the screen. And now, let's move on to the main presentation. Buddy Phaneuf is a fourth-generation funeral director. He has been running the family funeral business since 1989. Prior to his time at Phaneuf, he worked as a senior consultant with the management consulting firm Deloitte & Touche in Washington, D.C. Buddy earned an MBA in finance from George Washington University, as well as a bachelor's degree in operations research from the University of New Hampshire. He received his associate's degree in funeral service from the New England Institute. Buddy is very involved in his local and professional communities. He is a member of the New Hampshire Funeral Directors Association and a member of the Board of Trustees of the Visiting Nurse Association of Southern New Hampshire. Buddy's a lifelong parishioner of St. Marie Church and has served on several nonprofit boards throughout the Manchester area. In his spare time, he coaches youth hockey and enjoys skiing, mountain biking, playing hockey, and traveling. He lives in Manchester with his wife Pamela and their 3 children, Mallory, Jonathan, and Griffin. And with that, I'll turn the controls over to Buddy.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I think we have a great seminar planned here for you. This is actually a seminar that we've done in person probably 30 or 40 times, and we decided just to try it out to see different attendees, provide a little bit more flexibility. We decided to try it out as a webinar. I did realize that I need to update my my screen on my bio because all 3 of my kids are now out of the house, so they're no longer living in Manchester. And we have most of course, the attendees are here in the New Hampshire area, but we actually have an attendee from Denver, several people in Florida, probably taking advantage of the nice weather down there and not spending the cold winter here in New Hampshire, and someone actually as far as Cape Town, South Africa. So interesting if we get some questions. So let's start right ahead with the slide. So if you might have told some of your family members or friends, you're actually going to be spending a half an hour or so sitting in front of a computer screen listening to some funeral director in New Hampshire talking about pre-planning and final wishes, why would you ever do that? And there's really 3 reasons. There was a study that was done probably about 8 or 9 years ago by a large marketing company. And they interviewed people that had pre-planned their arrangements, and they said, why did you do it? Now, it was across a variety of demographics. That they talked to older people, younger people, affluent people, people that were living on a fixed income, different religions and ethnic groups. And they came up with 3 main reasons why people are really interested in pre-planning their arrangements. The first one is ensure that your final wishes will be known. Now, back years ago, I've been a funeral director for a number of years, but my family started in funeral service in New Hampshire in 1906. So that was my great-grandfather. And back then, there really were not a lot of decisions to make. I mean, everyone pretty much had a wake or a visitation. Everyone had a casket. Everyone went to church. Everyone then went to the cemetery. Well, fast forward now 120 or so years, we have cremation. New Hampshire has one of the highest cremation rates in the country. The cremation rate in New Hampshire is almost 80%. So you have people now selecting cremation. You might have heard about green burials and green options. You have people donating their body to science for anatomical donations. You have people that are doing memorial services, celebrations of life. So that's really the main reason, at least the number one reason, why people are getting their arrangements done in advance. It ensures that your wishes, whatever they might be, will be known in advance. The second reason, and I'm sure some of you will probably think of this already, a funeral, even a cremation, can be expensive if not planned in advance, especially if it's an untimely death. By pre-planning the arrangements ahead of time, it can eliminate financial uncertainty. In a few minutes, we're going to be talking about prices and cost and options. But that's the second reason why this study found that people do their arrangements ahead of time, by being able to eliminate the financial uncertainty of future costs of funeral expenses. And then thirdly, it provides peace of mind in knowing that everything has taken care of. I make a lot of funeral arrangements, and just the other day I was sitting with a family. Their mom had passed away, and it was a son and daughter. And I said, gee, your mom had the forethought of mind to make these arrangements years ago. And you could see from really just the look on their face and a sigh of relief, saying, oh my God. Their mom had never told them that they had made arrangements, that she had made arrangements in advance, but there was like a huge burden taken off the two children, saying, we were dreading this. We had no idea what my mom wanted. She never talked about it. And it's a really loving gift that people can do to plan ahead of time, not only providing peace of mind for the person themselves, but also providing peace of mind for their family members and their survivors. So those are really the three reasons why people would plan ahead. And I think most people would agree that it's a great idea. I mean, we're a country and a society of planning. We plan weddings, we plan for retirement, and I think pre-planning arrangements, your final arrangements, really just takes it the next logical step. So speaking of steps, let's talk about what steps are involved with actually getting your arrangements done in advance. It's actually a pretty simple process, and it's really as simple as what we call 1, 2, 3. The first thing that you would do is you would actually meet with our pre-planning counselor, one of our counselors, and Michelle, who's actually my sister, manages our whole pre-planning department. Most of the time it's done at one of our funeral homes. We have several funeral homes in Manchester. We have a funeral home in the Concord area up in Littleton, and we actually are in the process of acquiring a funeral home in Burlington, Vermont. So that's going to be our first foray into a different state, all family owned. But basically, you would be able to meet with Michelle or any of our pre-planning counselors, either in the funeral home, or we can go to you. A lot of people, especially people, maybe they don't have access to transportation, maybe they have a disability, maybe they're in an assisted living facility. So we're very able and do it on a regular basis to meet with people at their home. And we've also I met with a couple years ago. I remember a lady didn't want to come to the funeral home. She didn't want me to go to her house because she said her house, she didn't want to have to clean before I got there. So we actually went out to lunch and we sat down and we made arrangements. So whatever the venue may be, it really starts with that first step. And during the arrangement conference, a couple things happen. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to spend time gathering biographical information, because even though we're talking about your arrangements, there is some basic information that we need to do all the legal paperwork at the time, things like dates of birth and parents' names. But most of this meeting is actually spent talking about your wishes and your needs, because our job really is to recommend services and ceremonies. And if we don't spend a little bit of time learning about you, what do you like? What are you passionate about? Are you religious? Do you belong to certain societies or organizations? Do you have a large family? Do you have a small family? The more we can learn about you, the more we can now start recommending services and ceremonies that make sense for you. Obviously, if you're extremely spiritual, active in your church, we're not going to recommend something that's not consistent with that. So that's what we're going to spend a lot of time doing during this initial consultation, is really looking at your wishes, looking at your needs, learning about you. And then once we have that, then we can actually help create a service that's meaningful for you in your family. I mean, are we going to be doing a large church service? Do you want a simple green burial or a simple burial in a wood casket? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to have a graveside service? Do you want a fancy bronze casket? So all these things we're going to talk about, and we're going to help you create a service that's right for you. Not only are we actually talking about services, but the other thing that we're going to be doing is talking about ways that we can help you personalize the type of service. These are some examples of services that we've recently done. We had a family that wanted to do a balloon release at the cemetery at the end of the service. Of course, we deal with a lot of veterans, and we want to find out if someone is veteran. We want to be able to make sure that they can take advantage of all the government benefits, from flag folding to free honor guard to free burial in a veteran cemetery. So if someone is a veteran and they want to incorporate those things, we want to make sure that we can incorporate that into your arrangements. If someone wants to be cremated, we're going to talk about cremation and cremation jewelry. The cremated remains going to be buried, kept at home, scattered at sea. And then we even had the bottom right picture. We even had a service not too long ago where the gentleman passed away, and he wanted all his grandchildren to be dressed up as superheroes. So we went out and helped them get costumes, and they were the pallbearers dressing up in various superhero outfits. So whatever your wishes are, we're going to be able to help you personalize that based on something that's important to you. So let's talk about pricing for a minute, because pricing is important. A lot of people don't understand what actually goes into coming up with the price of the funeral. They think they can go down and say, oh, yep, it's just the casket, or it's just the urn, or it's just, people have a tendency to focus on sort of the merchandise, I think, because that's sort of the tangible aspect of when you think of a funeral. But there's actually more that goes into it than that. The funeral industry, believe it or not, is actually regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. We've been regulated since 1984, and they don't tell funeral homes what to charge and how much they can charge, but they do require that funeral homes break out their charges into three components: funeral home charges, merchandise, and cash advances. So I don't care if you're coming to a funeral home in New Hampshire, coming to a funeral home in Colorado, coming to a funeral home in Florida, or any of the other states in our country. Funeral home charges by law must be broken out into these three categories. Again, they don't tell you what to charge, but they do tell you how you're supposed to itemize and charge these. And historically, funeral home charge that we're going to talk about in a minute end up being about 40% of the total price of the funeral. Merchandise, about 40%, and then what we call cash advances end up being about 20% of the overall cost. So let's take a look at these three components in a little more detail. So the first thing is what we call funeral home charges. These are all the charges and fees that you normally associate the funeral home assisting and being involved with. Things like the fee of the professional funeral director that you're meeting with, making the arrangements, the overhead of the funeral home, using the funeral home for the wake, for the service. If we're having an embalming and a full service visitation, the embalming fee, preparation, transferring the person at the time of death into our care, coordinating with other parties such as churches and cemeteries. If the funeral home owns crematories like we do, it would be the crematory fee. So obviously there are a lot of different charges that can go into that first category of funeral home charges, and those charges are going to vary greatly based on what a family wants. We'll talk about specific prices in a minute, but if someone wants a very simple cremation, the funeral home charges are going to be a little bit less, or potentially a lot less, than if someone wants a full service with several day visitation, church service, gathering, hearses, limos, and things like that. But those are all the types of components that go into funeral home charges. The second category is merchandise. And merchandise would really be any of those items that the funeral homes are offering and the family is selecting to support the type of service that they want. For example, if someone is going to be having a traditional burial or even a simple graveside service, the family would select a casket. Most funeral homes like us have a variety of caskets. We have 80 different caskets to choose from $600 or $700 up to multiple thousands of dollars. So those would be something the family would select, would be caskets, vaults that are required by the cemetery. If someone's being cremated, urns or keepsakes. We handle flower arrangements, so the family could actually select flowers to us. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have been to services where you're signing their memorial book and little memorial cards. Those paper products that we customize would be included in merchandise. And then things like cemetery monuments and markers. Those are just an example of some of the major merchandise items that families would select that would be part of the funeral arrangements or cremation arrangements. And then finally, the third category is what we call cash advances. These are funds that we are in most funeral homes pay as a convenience item for other people or other organizations charging for parts of the funeral. So the most common one are the cemetery fees. Cemeteries charge for things like purchasing the grave, fees for opening and closing the grave. If you're having church services or the funeral home is hiring a clergy, there's generally honorariums. There's often musicians at church services. If you're asking the funeral home or asking us to place obituary notices in the paper or multiple newspapers, and then purchasing certified copies of death certificates. Even items like if a person passes away out of state, we have to pay airline fees to repatriate the person back to New Hampshire, or they pass away in New Hampshire and we have to send them to a different funeral home in a different state for interment. So those are all what we call cash advance items. Now, cash advance items can be marked up. The funeral home by law must disclose that. I had a lady that came into the funeral home the other day and she was looking at a couple of different funeral homes and she had told me she wanted a price for something and I had given her the pricing based on the service, and she realized that the cemetery fee that we quoted was less than what she had been quoted for another funeral home. And she says, "Oh, buddy, you must be wrong. You didn't charge me the right amount for this." And I said, "No, that's the right amount." I looked at what she had with the other funeral home, and the other funeral home had charged her a service fee for, excuse me, for paying for those cemetery. Now, there's nothing illegal with that, nothing wrong, but by law, the Federal Trade Commission says if a funeral home is charging you a fee for purchasing and coordinating for these cash advance items, they must disclose that on their price list. So I simply explained to her that, no, see over here in a little black and white, the funeral home charges you a 10% fee for acquiring all these cash advance items. We choose not to do that. If a funeral home doesn't make it inaccurate or a wrong funeral home, it's just something they have to disclose by law. So now that we talked about pricing a little bit, excuse me, let's talk about what the average price, because no one wants to pay, have the most expensive, the least expensive. We often have people come in and they say, what's the average price for a funeral? And the answer is, I don't know, because I don't know what you're considering average, and I don't know what you're considering a funeral. So for some people, the type of funeral service that they're thinking about is a very simple cremation. Hey, listen, I don't want to have a wake. I don't want to have a service. I just want you to pick me up at the time of death and handle the cremation and do all the legal paperwork. There, you're talking something that's a couple $1,000, $2,000, $2,500, $2,800, somewhere right around there for a simple cremation. Some people want cremation, but they say, no, I do want to be cremated, but I'd like to have a memorial service either at my church or a gathering at one of your facilities, one of your chapels, and maybe get an urn and an obituary. So what we call a cremation with a memorial service, you're going to be looking at somewhere around $3,000 on average, give or take. Could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less. Some people want to be buried, don't want to be cremated, but they may not want to have an open casket, have an embalming. They say, no, I just want to go to the veteran cemetery or just have a simple little graveside service. You're talking about $6,000 on average. Again, these are our pricing. I'm sure other funeral homes are going to be somewhere right around there. It could be a little more, it could be a little less, but I'm just giving you some averages based on 2017 pricing. So about $6,000. We have a lot of families that want cremation. As I mentioned earlier, New Hampshire has over a 75% cremation rate last year. So we have lots of families that say, no, we want cremation, but we want to have all the traditional things before the cremation. We want to have a wake, we want to have a viewing, we want to have a church or chapel service. So you can even rent a casket. You don't have to purchase a casket. So what we call a traditional cremation, you're looking at about $6,500 or so, give or take, for all the funeral home charges and merchandise to support a traditional cremation. Then on the end, on the way on the right-hand side, we have what we call a traditional funeral. No, I want a visitation or a wake. I want a service at the funeral home or at your church. And I want to go to the cemetery, have the committal service, the prayers, and then finally the burial. So you're looking at something that's going to be slightly south of around $9,000. Again, certainly could be more, could be less, but these are some average prices that we saw here at our facilities. We served about 2,600 families last year. So we looked at different average prices across different types of services. So that gives you hopefully a sense of the average price. Doesn't mean things can't be less. Doesn't mean things can't be more. So let's talk about, we talked about some pricing. Now let's talk about a question that we're asked quite frequently is, do all funeral homes charge the same price? And the short answer, I'll give everyone a moment to take a look at that. The short answer is generally in the same community or the same city or town, most funeral homes are priced fairly competitively. If you remember back from a few minutes ago, I said the funeral industry was regulated by the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. I'm not a huge fan of government regulation, but one of the things the FTC did back in 1984 is they required funeral homes to give prices over the telephone. So it makes it very easy for funeral homes to give out that information, and it also makes it extremely easy for consumers, especially if they're shopping around and looking at different funeral homes, if they've not developed a relationship with a funeral home, to call around. Fast forward now to 2017, 2018, we've had all our prices on our website for 25 years, or not quite, almost 25 years, over 20 years. So it makes it very, very easy. But basically, funeral homes are required to put prices, if they have a website, at least in some states, online, and of course giving over the phone. So we call our competitors every year and ask them what they charge for certain things. So we took a certain type of a funeral, and we did this last year. And this is 3 funeral homes in the Manchester, New Hampshire market. And we got 3 different prices for the same type of a funeral. One funeral home charged $6,450. So another funeral home around $6,500, another funeral home around $6,790, $6,800. So the short answer is funeral homes in the same community generally are priced to select a funeral home over another. So even though funeral homes in the same community are generally priced competitively, they may not charge the same for those 3 components. If you remember back from a few slides ago, we talked about the 3 charges for funeral homes: cash advances, merchandise, and professional fees. So, and this slide's a little bit challenging to sort of explain over a webinar, but I'll do my best. And if you have questions about it, you can certainly email me. We're actually going to give a copy of this presentation at the end of this, so you can review it. So let's talk at funeral home A. Funeral home A charged the least for their funeral. If you remember, it was a little over about $6,400. However, a lot of people focus on, as I talked about earlier, the merchandise. So some people come in and they say, oh, I just want to see the casket. And the problem with focusing on, say, just the casket or just the urn is you could get wrong information. So I had a lady, believe it or not, came in 2 weeks ago, had a picture of a casket that she found. And she was going around at different funeral homes and said, do you offer this casket? And I said, we absolutely do. Matter of fact, not only do we offer it in 4 different colors. And she asked me how much was it, and I told her what the price was. It was $2,500 or something like that. And she said, okay, thank you. She wrote it down. And I said, well, aren't you interested in what the rest of the funeral might be? She says, no, I just want to know what the casket's going to be. So the risk with that is funeral home A, as you can see from the purple area, charged the most for their casket. So one would assume, oh, they're going to be the most expensive funeral home. But the reality is they charge the least for their services, which is the green area. On the flip side, if you look at funeral home C, they charge the least for the casket. So you can make a decision saying, oh, that must be the least expensive funeral home if I'm trying to save money, or they're much more affordable because their caskets aren't marked up. The reality is they charged about 30% more for their services, end up being more expensive. So as a smart consumer, you really need to look at all 3 parts of the funeral in order to make an educated decision on where you're getting your best value. Again, price isn't the only thing, but I know for many, many people, especially people living on fixed income, it's a pretty important thing. So notice thus far, we've been talking about pre-planning. We've not talked about paying for anything. And several people that we deal with on a weekly basis say, you know what, I just want to get my wishes, in writing. I want my kids to know. We have a free planning guide that we offer, that we send out. You can have access to that at the end of this webinar. So people may just want to I want this color casket. I want this type of a service. I want to go to this church. I want these people pallbearers. I want my cremated remains scattered at this place. So the question we get from a lot of people is, do we have to prepay in order to pre-plan our arrangements? And the short answer is absolutely not. We have many people that just want to give us their wishes. Again, we have a planning guide that we hand out for those things. But there are some reasons why people really would want to sort of take it to the next step. A couple things, and I highlighted 5 of them here. The first reason why people end up often prearranging or pre-funding their arrangements is that you have the option to lock in prices. Historically, funeral prices go up about 5% a year. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but a $5,000 funeral, $250, 10 years later is going to be another $25. So that $5,000 funeral today is going to be $7,500, down the road. So inflation cuts into prices of funerals. So that's one reason I should say why people choose to prepay their arrangements is to lock it in. The second one is that no one can change your wishes. New Hampshire, believe it or not, has some of the best laws in the country when it comes to consumer protection and pre-funding arrangements. One of the laws in New Hampshire says that if someone has prearranged and pre-funded a funeral, they cannot have their wishes changed at the time of death. About 2 months ago, I had a gentleman come in, and his grandmother died. He was the legal next of kin, and she had made all her own arrangements and paid for everything. And he said, "Yeah, I'm not really from around here, and my mom was her daughter, and she's passed away, and it's really just me, and there are some other grandkids. I know my grandmother picked a full traditional funeral and had a service, but I'm just going to get her cremated and scatter her cremated remains." Now, that's not what she wanted. That's not what she paid for. So it is against the law in the state of New Hampshire, and every state's different, to change someone's wishes at the time of death. The person can do it themselves during your lifetime, or their power of attorney can do it. They can also do it at the time of death through a court order. But that's the second reason that family members and people say, listen, if I left it to someone else, things are going to get changed. I want to guarantee that that's what's going to happen. The other reason, number 3, is that we deal with a lot of people that are in a Medicaid spend down, maybe getting placed in a nursing home or trying to look for some financial assistance. So that's the third reason why people want to do it, is that they're going to shelter their money from Medicaid spend down. It's one of the few things that's excluded from Medicaid eligibility when someone's getting the arrangements done in advance. The fourth reason is making sure your survivors are not financially burdened. We talked about that. One of the reasons earlier on in the slides why people pre-plan ahead of time. It ensures that your financial, the cost of the cremation is not going to be financially burdened or burdensome to your survivors. And then finally, it's really one last selfless act of love that people can make arrangements and not have to, have any family members worry, and it's really a last selfless act of love. So those are some of the reasons why people may want to take it to the next step and not only pre-plan, but also pre-fund their arrangements as well. So even though we talked about why there's some really good reasons why people do it, and some of the reasons why people want to pre-fund, some people are really still hesitant because of the what ifs. They're trying to, what if this happens? What if this happens? And what if we move? We have a lot of people, especially here in New Hampshire, that live 6 months in New Hampshire, 6 months in Florida, or, hey, listen, what if I make my arrangements here, but I move to another state? And the answer is funeral arrangements, pre-funded funeral arrangements, are portable. What that means is that they can move with you. They can move to a funeral home in a different state, in a different city, even within the same city. So by making your arrangements here or at any funeral home, it can be moved. Not only are the original funds, I talked a little while ago that mentioned that New Hampshire has some of the best laws in the country when it comes to consumers prepaying. So if someone makes arrangements here in New Hampshire and then decides that they're moving to Florida, hey, listen, I'm sick of the winters and I'm moving with my daughter, not only does the original amount that they paid have to be transferred, any interest and dividends and any increase in value of the funds has to be moved over as well. So that sort of answers the what if. What if I can't afford to prepay? We have, of course, a lot of people that are dealing on, living on a fixed income. $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 can be inexpensive. So what if I can't prepay in advance? Well, the answer is there are lots of different funding options. You can certainly pay in full. We talked about locking in the price. You can partially pay. You can say, hey, listen, I want to start doing some sort of a payment plan. I'm living on a fixed income. I can only afford $30 a month, $20 a month, $100. Hey, I have existing life insurance. We can become the beneficiary of a policy, and you can end up prepaying for your range without any money changing hands at all. Or we can have a combination of the above. We have some people that say, listen, I have a small insurance policy and I have some cash that I want to use as a down payment, and then I want to do payment plans. So very rarely there's a situation that we cannot find a payment plan that makes sense for families that can afford it. Again, whether it's paying in full, whether it's paying over time, 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, whether it's using existing life insurance, lots of different options that are available. So what if my wishes change? Hey, listen, I originally said I wanted to be buried and now I want to be cremated, or I wanted to go to this church and now I changed my mind, I wanted to go to this church. Just as cremation arrangements are portable, you can move them, you can also change your wishes during your lifetime. I talked about that earlier, that wishes can't be changed at the time of death without a court order in the state of New Hampshire, but you yourself or your power of attorney can make any changes. So just because you do something now doesn't mean you can't change it in the future. Doesn't happen that often, but we have people that say, listen, back when I made these arrangements, cremation wasn't as popular and I really didn't want to do it. Now I've had a change of heart and I want to modify my arrangements, or I used to be active in this church and now I'm not anymore. So arrangements that you have made now or have even made in the past can absolutely be changed. And then finally, what if I'm not sure? You get some people that are just, I want this. I don't know if I want to pay or not. I don't know if I'm going to move. I don't know if I want cremation or burial. And I always tell people doing something is better than doing nothing. It happens very frequently where we had a lady that passed away within the last couple of weeks. We had a file on her that was probably an inch thick. She had been in 6 or 7 times over the years, and one time she wanted this, and the next time, so she ended up doing nothing. And not only did she not help her children were confusing. Oh my God! And in 2011 she wanted to be buried, and then 2012 she wanted this, she did that. She was giving her family mixed messages. So doing something is always better than really doing nothing. A couple more slides that we have here, and then we'll have some time for a little question and answer period. So what happens if I give makes sense. I know what I want to do. I want to prepay. So what happens once I prepay for my arrangements and I give the money to the funeral home? Well, in the state of New Hampshire, there are only 2 options that we can do as licensed funeral directors. Excuse me. The first thing is that we have to place the funds into an irrevocable mortuary trust in a financial institution that has offices here in the state of New Hampshire. We happen to use Morgan Stanley as our irrevocable broker. Think of it as an escrow account. The funds have to stay there along with any accumulated interest. The second option is we can place the funds into a special type of a life insurance product. It's not a policy that requires a health exam or anything like that. It's a flat fee. There's no multiple premiums, but we'll often use life insurance to help families, especially if people are interested in doing payment plans over time. So those are the only 2 options that you can do in the state of New Hampshire. There was a funeral home. There was a funeral home up north that thought there was a third option with the prepaid funds, and that was to take the money and go to Hawaii for 2 weeks. Well, the state found out. He went to jail. His funeral home got sold, and I think he's out of jail. Didn't know him, but so it's not a slap on the wrist in the state of New Hampshire. It is a big deal. Funds must be placed into an irrevocable mortuary trust or placed into a special type of insurance policy. And then should I compare several funeral homes before I commit to something? And the short answer is absolutely. Not all funeral homes offer the same planning options. I had a lady that came in, or I didn't actually see her, my sister saw her, and said, hey, she went to a funeral home down the street and they didn't accept life insurance assignments. So if you know, hey, I need to do a payment plan or I need to do life insurance, you want to make sure you're in the driver's seat. So you want to make sure the funeral home that you're working with offers the plan that makes sense for you. Not all funeral homes are set up really to handle the type of services that you want. The example that I always use is cremation. If you want to be cremated, I would appreciate if you use our firm, but if not, you should select a funeral home that owns and operates their own crematory. I mean, New Hampshire, as I mentioned, has over a 70% cremation rate, yet there's only 13 funeral homes in New Hampshire that own crematories, and there's about 90 funeral homes in the state. That means the vast majority of funeral homes are subcontracting out this important part of the process to a third party where they have little or no control over. We have another seminar on cremation, so I don't want to get too far into that. But you want to make sure the funeral home that you're using is set up to handle the type of service that you want. Also, customs and traditions. One of my staff members just did a little analysis and found out that last year we dealt with 70 different religions. Of course, Catholic and different Protestant religions, different ethnic, 3 or 4 different types of Islamic services, Hindu services. So you want to make sure that the funeral home you're working with understands the customs and traditions in your belief systems. Even if you're not religious, are they set up to be able to handle a humanistic service or something that's very, very tailored? And then, like anything else, not all funeral homes are the same quality and level of service. I don't care if you're dealing with funeral homes or dry cleaners or doctors. Quality and level of services vary from any type of service industry. And finally, what should a consumer, this is my little checklist, what should a consumer do before finalizing a prepaid funeral contract? And here's my little checklist. The first thing is that before, especially if you've never had a relationship with a funeral home and you're looking at several different ones, you want to request an informational meeting. Hey, listen, I'm thinking about making my arrangements. I'm not committing, and I'd like to come in, see your facilities, meet your staff, get some pricing. If the funeral home right there says, gee, you know what, we're really not able to do that, or unless you want to commit, that should be a red flag right there. If they're not willing to spend some time with you now, then you need to question how they're going to be dealing with your survivors at the time. So the first thing you want to do is request an informational meeting. You also don't want to settle. As I mentioned earlier, you're in the driver's seat. So if you know you need to use life insurance, or you want to do a payment plan, or what your family is going to need, has some specific wishes, you want to make sure that the funeral home can accommodate the plan that you want, the arrangements that you want. Third, make sure you have it guaranteed in writing that the funeral home prices are not going to increase. As I mentioned, we're a family-owned funeral home, but there are quite a number of funeral homes throughout the country, and a number in New Hampshire that are publicly owned corporate funeral homes. Doesn't make them bad funeral homes. We actually have several employees that used to work at these public companies. But the guy that's in the Manchester or the Concord or the Littleton funeral home now may be transferred to the Seattle or the Detroit office down the road. So if your family's coming in and said, oh yeah, Steve who worked here said my mom was going to get a free limo, or the price is not going to go up, the guy's going to say, oh yeah, I remember Steve, he worked here 10 years ago. He's now working in Spokane. So you want to make sure that you have it in writing that the price is not going to increase. And while price is very important, of course, especially we deal with a lot of seniors living on a fixed income, you don't want to base your decision on price specifically or exclusively. The quality of the staff, the professionalism of the facilities, how recent they've updated services, that's going to go much further in helping your family through their bereavement and through the trying time, rather than, oh, we saved $100, but the funeral home hasn't redecorated since 1952. So those are all important. I'd like to leave it open. I know I've gone a little bit. I said I'd keep it within an hour or a few minutes, half an hour, I'm sorry, a few minutes over. I did get an email, and I think hopefully I addressed it. I got an email from Michelle that said, can I make payments over time, and what's the minimum amount? So the answer, hopefully I addressed that. The answer is yes, you can set up a payment plan over time. There is no minimum amount. Everything is really customized and personalized. So you can absolutely set up anything. It's really a custom thing where we're working with you on if you're on a fixed income, you have certain, and by the way, you don't have to continue. When I say that, we have some people that say, listen, I can't commit to X amount of dollars every month. So the person says, hey, I'm going to give you $300 now. Then when I can financially maybe afford some more, I'll do some more. So it doesn't have to be a fixed payment plan. You really can set up something that makes sense for you. We can actually take payments off of your checking account, automatic credit card payments. Martha here, so hope that Michelle, hopefully that answered your question. Martha, and my font is a little small. Martha asks, how does the insurance beneficiary option work? Okay, good question, Martha. So let's say that you have a $10,000 policy with Metropolitan Life Insurance, and the funeral you pick out is $5,000. Well, obviously there's more insurance than we need. So what you designate as the funeral home as the primary beneficiary, and then you would designate your family member, your estate, your whomever as a secondary beneficiary. So at the time of death, what we do is we update everything to the current price, send in the claim to the insurance company. They will pay us what the current price of the funeral is, and the extra money would either get sent to whomever you've designated as another beneficiary or your estate or anything like that. So just because you may have a policy that's significantly more than the funeral that you want doesn't mean the funeral home is encumbering all of that. We're only going to be using the total amount of the insurance policy. And I don't want this to be an insurance lesson, but what we're working off of is not the face value of the policy, it's the death benefit. What most insurance companies do, especially whole life policies, is that the face is what the original amount of the policy is issued at. The cash value is if you cash in the policy now, how much you're getting. We're concerning ourselves with the death benefit. If I would have passed away now, how much is the insurance company going to pay? And that ends up being the original face value plus any interest and dividends that have accrued, called what's called paid up additions. So I always tell people, before you come in, call your insurance company and get a statement showing what the death benefit is, because that's actually the larger amount that you're actually working off for the price of the funeral. I remember back not too long ago, there was a gentleman that came in and said, gee, I only have this $2,000 policy that I took out, over 50 years ago, and the funeral I want is much more than that. Well, we called the insurance company, and that $2,000 policy over the last 45 years was now worth $8,800. So not only did he not have enough to pay for his funeral, he had more than he needed. So there's money that's going back to his family or his estate. I don't have a name of this person. The question is, what if I make my arrangements with you and I pass away while I'm traveling? Great question, person without a name. But we actually offer something that is called nationwide travel protection. So at the time of your arrangements, if you purchase, and it's a flat, it's a one-time fee for $325. I hope I got the price right. If I didn't, I'm sure my sister Michelle will let me know that I said it wrong over the year. But I'm pretty sure it's $325. That if you pass away while on vacation, while traveling, you live 6 months here, 6 months in Florida, that there is no additional charge to you or your family, including airfare or have the cremation take place. All the additional fees are covered to get you back here to New Hampshire. So, for people that, that say, oh, I spend, 3 weeks a year, in our RV traveling around, probably a good idea. The lady in the nursing home, that's probably not going to be, doing a lot of traveling. Not a great idea for her to get travel protection. That's a good add-on value-added service for people that do any amount of traveling. I think we have time for one more question. Paula wants to know, would an annuity be considered an appropriate funding source? And I gotta be honest, Paula, I don't know the answer to that, because an annuity generally pays a monthly or quarterly annual amount. I don't know if the annuity can be repurposed and funds sent to the funeral home. I know annuity payments oftentimes are included for Medicaid spend down. So that's a great question, but it's a better question, I think, for your estate attorney and not me. So nice question. Oops, I'm sorry. We have one last question. Norman, can you do a cremation and then send the cremated remains to another funeral home up north for a graveside service? And the answer is absolutely. That we do cremations for people all the time that say, listen, I live in New Hampshire, but I have a cemetery plot in Minnesota. So we can send cremated remains, whether it be to another funeral home or directly to a cemetery or another family member. So yes, we can handle as much or as little as you want. That is it for the time we have. I'm trying to be considerate of everyone's time. If you have any more questions, I know we do have another people that had sent questions. Feel free to email them to me. I'm going to give you my personal email, which is buddy@phaneuf.net. That's buddy@phaneuf.net. euf.net, and I will do my best to answer your question in a timely fashion. And if I don't know the answer, I will make sure that I find someone that does. You can see on the slide here, we have some resources, and the first resource that you're going to be receiving is you're going to be receiving our basically what we call our Phaneuf Funeral Home brochure. We're also going to be sending you our My Life, My Wishes planning guide. And the third thing that you're going to be getting is you're going to be getting a PDF file that has some recent blog posts that we've done that relate to planning and financial planning. So all those are going to be available to all of you as well. So with that in mind, the other thing I'm going to mention that if you are interested in maybe taking the next step and setting up an informational meeting, under the resources link, you're going to be able to actually send an email to Michelle and actually fill out and say, yes, I'm interested in learning more about pre-planning. If you're ready to schedule something, you have a link to do that. That'll go right to Michelle's email. You can click it, and then she can email you or call you and get in touch with you. Also, another great resource is our blog. So if you've not subscribed to that, I would recommend that you do that. Lots of topics. The other thing I would finally ask you is that please give me your feedback on our webinar if you thought it was valuable. If you have some ideas on, hey, I would like you to do a webinar on cremation or green burials or anatomical donations, we're always looking for great topics. We have a couple ideas that I'd rather hear from you. So with that, we are going to be concluding our seminar, webinar, and I appreciate all of you that actually, we started with 48. Looks like we only had 5 or so people drop off, so that's pretty good. Evidently it wasn't as boring as I thought it might have been, but anyway, thank you all, and I appreciate you you spending your time with us here this afternoon, and have a great day. Thank you.